The chapel smelled of pine resin and old stone, a scent that would forever remind me of the day I stopped belonging to myself. I was 19, standing in a dress that wasn't mine, about to marry a man I'd never spoken to, a man whose very name made grown warriors lower their eyes, the Alpha King. My hands trembled as I clutched the simple bouquet of white roses someone had thrust into my arms that morning. Through the veil's gauze, I could see the assembled pack members, hundreds of them, filling every pew and spilling into the aisles. Their faces blurred together, a sea of curiosity and pity. They knew what I knew. This wasn't a love match. This was politics. This was my father's desperation made flesh. "You'll do this for the family," he'd said 3 weeks ago, his voice brooking no argument. "The Alpha King needs a wife, and he's chosen you. Do you understand what an honor this is?" Honor. The word tasted like ash in my mouth even now. I understood what it really was. A transaction. My father's pack was small, struggling, teetering on the edge of dissolution. The Alpha King's protection would save us, and all it cost was me. The organ music swelled, pulling me from my thoughts. This was it. This was the moment I walked toward my future, whether I wanted it or not. My father stood beside me, his grip on my arm almost painful. "Smile," he hissed under his breath. "You look like you're going to your execution." Perhaps I was. We began our slow procession down the aisle. I forced my chin up, forced my spine straight, forced myself to look ahead even though every instinct screamed at me to run. Through the veil, I could finally see him, standing at the altar, impossibly tall, impossibly still. They called him Dante Grayson, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of 12 packs, commander of the largest wolf army our kind had ever known. He was 32, 13 years my senior, and rumored to be as cold as the mountain peaks that bordered his lands. He'd lost his first wife 5 years ago. No one spoke about how. As we drew closer, I could make out more details. Dark hair, almost black, swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Broad shoulders that strained against his formal jacket, and eyes. Gods, his eyes, the color of storm clouds, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He didn't smile, didn't soften, just watched me approach like a predator watching prey. My father deposited me at the altar like a package being delivered, then stepped back without a word of comfort or encouragement. I was alone now, standing barely 3 feet from the man who would own me by the end of this ceremony. "Miss Hartley," Dante said, his voice a low rumble that I felt in my chest. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement, clinical, distant. "Your Majesty," I whispered, because that's what I'd been instructed to say. The officiant began speaking, but I barely heard the words. My mind was racing, cataloging escape routes I'd never use, imagining futures I'd never have. I'd dreamed of this moment once, as a little girl, the white dress, the handsome groom, the promise of forever. But I'd imagined love, choice, joy. Not this hollow ceremony where I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. "The rings," the officiant announced. A young man stepped forward, one of Dante's personal guard, I assumed. He was younger than the Alpha King, maybe mid-20s, with sandy hair and surprisingly kind eyes. He offered the rings on a velvet cushion, and I caught the briefest flash of sympathy in his expression before he stepped back. Dante took my hand, and I flinched. His grip was firm, but not cruel. His skin surprisingly warm. He slid the ring onto my finger, a simple platinum band that felt heavy as chains. "Your turn," he said quietly, releasing my hand. My fingers shook as I picked up his ring. It was larger, masculine, inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. I had to steady his hand with both of mine to slide it on, and I felt the barely perceptible tension in his muscles, as if he were restraining himself from pulling away. He didn't want this either, I realized. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made everything worse. We were both trapped. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, his voice echoing through the sudden silence. "You may kiss your bride, Your Majesty." This was the moment I'd been dreading most. Dante's eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in their depths. Uncertainty, regret, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. He lifted my veil with careful precision, folding it back over my head. The cool air hit my face, and I realized I was sweating despite the chapel's chill. He leaned down, and I closed my eyes, bracing myself. His lips brushed mine, feather-light, lasting barely a heartbeat. It was the most impersonal kiss imaginable, more contract signing than romantic gesture. When he pulled back, his expression was unreadable once more. The crowd erupted in applause that sounded more dutiful than celebratory. "Come," Dante said, offering his arm. "We have a reception to endure." Endure. At least he was honest. I took his arm, and we turned to face our audience. Hundreds of faces stared back, some curious, some envious, some openly skeptical. I saw my mother in the third row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the part of the emotional mother of the bride. But I knew the truth. She'd argued against this marriage, right up until my father had silenced her with a look. We walked back down the aisle together, and I felt the weight of every gaze. They were judging me, measuring me, wondering if I'd survive. The Alpha King's second wife, what had happened to the first? The reception was held in the grand hall of Dante's estate. My estate now, I supposed, though it would never feel like home. The room was massive, with vaulted ceilings and windows that overlooked dark forests stretching to the horizon. Long tables groaned under the weight of food and wine, and musicians played in the corner, their melodies almost drowned out by conversation. Dante led me to the head table, where we sat on chairs that might as well have been thrones. He didn't speak to me, didn't look at me. Instead, he accepted congratulations from a steady stream of visiting alphas and pack officials, his responses brief and formal. I sat beside him like an ornament, smiling when expected, nodding when appropriate, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. "You look miserable." I jumped at the voice, turning to find the young guard who'd held the rings now standing beside my chair. Up close, I could see he had freckles across his nose and laugh lines around his eyes. Unusual for someone in the Alpha King's service. "I'm sorry," I managed. "It's all right," he said quietly, glancing at Dante, who was engaged in conversation with an elderly alpha. "I'm Connor. I've been with His Majesty for 6 years, and I'm telling you, as someone who's seen him at his worst and his best, he's not what you think." "You don't know what I think," I said, more sharply than intended. Connor's smile was sad. "I know what everyone thinks, but give him time. Give yourself time." He paused, then added, "He asked about you, you know, before the wedding. Wanted to know what you liked, what made you happy. He's trying, in his way." Before I could respond, Dante's hand settled on my shoulder, and Connor straightened immediately. "Connor, you're needed at the perimeter," Dante said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Yes, Your Majesty." Connor bowed slightly to me. "My lady," he said, and disappeared into the crowd. Dante's hand remained on my shoulder for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt heat radiating through the fabric of my dress. Then he removed it, returning his attention to his guests as if the interaction had never happened. The evening dragged on. I picked at my food, drank more wine than I should have, and smiled until my face ached. As the sun set and candles were lit throughout the hall, I realized with growing dread that the reception would end soon, and then I'd be alone with him. The tradition was clear. The Alpha King and his new queen would retire to the private chambers, where the marriage would be consummated. The word made my stomach churn. As if reading my thoughts, Dante leaned close, the first time he'd voluntarily come near me all evening. His breath was warm against my ear as he whispered, "We need to talk. Privately." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Now?" "Now." He stood, offering his hand. The conversations around us died down as people noticed. This was it. The moment everyone had been waiting for. The moment the new couple would disappear to fulfill their marital duties. I took his hand because I had no choice, letting him guide me through the crowd. People whispered as we passed, and I caught fragments of conversation. "She's so young. Think she'll last longer than the first one? Poor girl doesn't know what she's gotten into." Their words followed us out of the hall and down a long corridor lit by flickering torches. Dante's grip on my hand was firm, but not painful, his pace quick enough that I had to hurry to keep up. We climbed a spiral staircase, past guards who averted their eyes, and finally stopped before a heavy wooden door. Dante pushed it open, revealing a suite of rooms that took my breath away. The main chamber was enormous, furnished with dark wood and deep blue fabrics. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. And dominating the far wall was a bed, massive, draped in silk, impossible to ignore. He released my hand and moved to the fireplace, his back to me. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension and unspoken fears. "I know what you're thinking," he finally said, his voice quieter than I'd heard it all day. "You're wondering what kind of monster you've married. You're afraid of me." I couldn't deny it, so I said nothing. He turned to face me, and in the firelight, I could see the exhaustion etched into his features. He looked older than 32 in that moment, worn down by responsibilities I couldn't begin to imagine. "I want to give you something," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Your wedding gift." I wasn't expecting gifts, especially not from him. He pulled out a small leather-bound book and crossed the room to hand it to me. Our fingers brushed as I took it, and I felt that same unexpected warmth. I looked down at the book, confused. It was old, the leather soft with age, tied closed with a ribbon. "What is this?" "Open it." I untied the ribbon with trembling fingers and opened to the first page. My breath caught. It was a journal, my mother's journal, from before I was born. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the same looping script she used in the letters she wrote me when I was away at school. "How did you—" I looked up at him, shocked. "I asked what would make you happy," Dante said simply. "Connor told me you'd mentioned missing your mother's stories from when she was young. This seemed appropriate." I flipped through the pages, seeing entries about my mother's courtship with my father, her wedding day, her hopes and dreams. Tears stung my eyes. "There's more," Dante said, and his voice had changed somehow, become almost gentle. "Look at the back page." I turned to the final entry and found a letter in different handwriting, my father's. It was addressed to my mother, dated 30 years ago, full of promises and declarations of love that he'd long since forgotten how to express. "Your father sold this journal to a book dealer 10 years ago when your pack hit hard times," Dante explained. "I tracked it down through 3 different collectors. It took months." I looked at him, this man I'd thought incapable of kindness, and saw him differently. Not softer, exactly, but more human, more real. "Why?" I whispered. "Because you deserve to have one thing in this marriage that was yours, one thing chosen with care instead of obligation." He paused, then added, "And because I know what it's like to be forced into a life you didn't choose." Before I could respond, before I could even process what he'd just revealed, a howl split the night outside. Long, mournful, and wrong somehow. Not celebratory like the traditional wedding howls, but warning. Dante's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His body tensed, his eyes sharpening, his casual posture transforming into something predatory and alert. Another howl joined the first, then another, until a chorus of warning cries filled the air. Someone pounded on the door. "Your Majesty! We're under attack!" Dante was already moving, grabbing weapons I hadn't noticed mounted on the wall, a short sword, 2 daggers. He tossed one of the daggers to me, and I caught it reflexively. "Stay here," he commanded, heading for the door. "Lock it behind me. Don't open it for anyone but Connor or me." "What's happening?" I demanded, fear spiking through me. He paused in the doorway, looking back at me with those storm-gray eyes. And in them, I saw not the cold, distant Alpha King from the ceremony, but something fierce and protective. "Someone's attacking during a wedding celebration," he said grimly. "That's not just bold, it's a declaration of war." Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him, and I was alone with the sound of howls and the weight of a dagger in my hand, and a journal pressed against my heart. My wedding night had just taken a turn I never could have anticipated. And somehow, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I stood frozen in the center of that enormous room, the dagger heavy in my palm, my mother's journal clutched against my chest like a shield. Outside, the howls had turned to snarls, punctuated by shouts and the clash of metal on metal. The wedding celebration had transformed into a battlefield in mere moments. My hands were shaking. I'd never held a weapon before, not a real one. My father's pack was small, peaceful. We didn't train our daughters for combat. We trained them to smile, to serve, to survive through submission. But submission wouldn't help me now. I moved to the window, drawn by morbid curiosity and the need to understand what was happening. The glass was thick, the view partially obscured by the angle, but I could see torches moving in the darkness below, figures running, the glint of weapons, and then I saw them. Wolves, massive and dark-furred, pouring from the forest like a living shadow. Rogues. Had to be. No organized pack would be foolish enough to attack the Alpha King during his own wedding, unless they wanted to send a message. A crash from somewhere below made me jump. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. Dante had told me to stay here, to lock the door. But what if they broke through? What if they came for me specifically? The Alpha King's new wife would be a valuable hostage, a perfect target. I was still wearing my wedding dress, impractical, restrictive, impossible to run in. Without thinking, I set down the journal and dagger and began tearing at the buttons, my fingers clumsy with panic. The dress fell away in layers of silk and tulle, leaving me in just my slip. I grabbed a robe from the wardrobe, dark green, warm, and wrapped it around myself, tying it tight. Better. Not good, but better. I retrieved the dagger, testing its weight. The handle was wrapped in leather, worn smooth by use. Dante's dagger. Had he killed with this blade? The thought should have horrified me. Instead, it was strangely comforting. He'd trusted me with his weapon. The sounds of fighting seemed to be moving closer. I could hear boots pounding in the corridor outside, voices shouting orders I couldn't quite make out. My mind raced through options: hide under the bed. Too obvious. The wardrobe? A death trap. The bathing chamber? Maybe if I could barricade the door. Before I could move, the door handle rattled. I raised the dagger, my entire body tensing. Who's there? It's Connor. The voice was breathless, urgent. My lady, please. I need to get you somewhere safe. I hesitated. Dante had said not to open for anyone but Connor or himself. But what if this was a trick? What if someone was forcing Connor to... Please, Connor called again. They're in the East Wing. We need to move now. I made a decision, praying it was the right one. I unlocked the door and yanked it open, dagger raised. Connor stumbled inside, and I barely had time to register the blood on his jacket before he was locking the door behind him. His kind eyes were now hard with focus, a sword gripped in his hand. Are you hurt? I asked, eyeing the blood. Not mine, he said shortly, then looked me over. Good. You're dressed for movement. We need to get you to the safe room. The safe room? Every royal residence has one. Hidden chambers, reinforced doors, supplies for a siege if necessary. He moved to the fireplace, running his hands along the stone mantel until something clicked. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark passage. His Majesty's orders. You're to be secured immediately. I glanced at the journal on the bed, still lying where I'd set it. Wait. No time, Connor said, but he followed my gaze and understood. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the journal, and handed it to me. Now come. Stay close, and stay quiet. We plunged into the passage, and Connor pulled a torch from a bracket just inside the entrance. The wall swung shut behind us with a soft thud, and suddenly the sounds of battle were muffled, distant. The passage was narrow, the walls rough stone, the air cool and slightly damp. How many attackers? I whispered as we hurried through the darkness. At least 50 that we've counted, maybe more. Connor's voice was grim. They hit us from 3 sides simultaneously. Someone planned this carefully. They knew exactly when the guard would be lightest, when everyone would be distracted. During the wedding, I said, understanding dawning. They waited until the wedding because they knew security would be focused on the ceremony, not defense. Smart girl, Connor said, but there was no condescension in his tone. The Alpha King is handling the main force at the front gates, but a smaller group broke through the servants' entrance. That's why we need to get you hidden. We turned a corner, then descended a steep set of stairs carved into the rock. I had to use one hand against the wall to keep my balance, the other still gripping Dante's dagger. The journal was tucked into the pocket of my robe, pressing against my side. Connor, I said as we reached the bottom of the stairs, if they planned this attack so carefully, don't you think they might know about the safe room too? He paused, looking back at me with those surprisingly perceptive eyes. For a moment, I saw him recalculate, weighing options with the speed of someone trained for crisis. You might be right, he admitted. But I have orders. A howl echoed through the passage behind us. Too close, too clear. Not a warning howl, a hunting howl. They're in the walls, Connor said, and I heard the fear he was trying to hide. They must have had inside information. Damn it. He grabbed my hand and we ran, the torch casting wild shadows on the walls. The passage split ahead, and Connor veered left without hesitation. Behind us, I could hear claws scraping on stone, heavy breathing that wasn't human. If we can't reach the safe room, I gasped, struggling to keep pace. Where are we going? Plan B, Connor said. There's an exit that leads to the stables. We get you on a horse, and you ride for the border. Your father's territory. It's 3 hours south. You can make it. And leave everyone here? Leave Dante? Connor glanced back at me, surprise flickering across his face. You've been married to him for 6 hours and you barely know him. He gave me my mother's journal, I said, and somehow that explained everything and nothing. He spent months tracking it down. He cared enough to do that. I'm not abandoning him on our wedding night. My lady, Elena, I interrupted. If we're running for our lives together, you can call me Elena. Despite everything, Connor almost smiled. Elena, then. The Alpha King would have my head if anything happened to you. His orders were clear. The passage opened into a larger chamber, some kind of underground meeting room, with a table and chairs carved from stone and covered in dust. Connor moved straight to the far wall, searching for another hidden door. But I stopped in the center of the room, a thought crystallizing in my mind. They're hurting us, I said. Connor froze. What? Think about it. They attacked during the wedding. Maximum chaos. Minimal defense. They force you to move me through the passages because it's protocol, but they knew about the passages. They've been following us, pushing us in a specific direction. I turned slowly, examining the room. This is a trap. As if summoned by my words, figures emerged from the shadows. 3 of them, moving with the fluid grace of trained fighters. 2 men and a woman, all wearing dark clothing, all armed. Their eyes gleamed in the torchlight, reflecting like animals. Rogues. But not random attackers. These 3 moved like soldiers. Well, well, the woman said, her voice smooth and cold. The new queen is cleverer than expected. I told them you'd figure it out, but they didn't believe me. Connor stepped in front of me, sword raised. You'll have to go through me. That can be arranged, one of the men said, drawing twin daggers. The woman focused on me, ignoring Connor entirely. Your husband killed my brother 5 years ago. Did he tell you that? Did he mention how many people he's murdered in his quest for power? I started, but she cut me off. His first wife knew. That's why she's dead. She tried to leave him, tried to expose what he really is. So he silenced her. The woman smiled, sharp and cruel. And now you'll die too. Poetic, don't you think? Both his wives dead. Both failed. Something in me, some instinct I didn't know I possessed, rebelled against her words. Maybe it was the memory of Dante's careful gift, his quiet admission that he understood what it was like to be forced into an unwanted life. Maybe it was the way Connor had spoken of him earlier, with loyalty that went beyond mere duty. Or maybe I was just tired of being told what to think, what to feel, what to accept as truth. I don't believe you, I said clearly. The woman's smile faltered. Excuse me? I don't believe you, I repeated, stepping out from behind Connor. My hand tightened on the dagger. If you wanted justice for your brother, you'd challenge Dante openly. Instead, you're attacking during a wedding. targeting someone who can't defend herself. That's not justice. That's cowardice. The woman's eyes flashed with rage. "You stupid little girl!" She lunged. Connor intercepted her, their blades clashing with a sound that rang through the chamber. The two men moved simultaneously, one engaging Connor while the other came for me. I'd never fought before, had no training, no experience. But I'd watched wolves spar since childhood, had observed the way they moved, the way they anticipated attacks. And I had something these rogues didn't expect. Desperation sharpened by the will to survive. The man swung his blade in a wide arc, confident he could disarm me easily. I ducked under his swing and drove forward, remembering what my father's guards had joked about once. In close quarters, a small knife beats a large sword. My dagger caught him in the side, sliding between ribs with shocking ease. His eyes went wide with surprise and pain. I yanked the blade free and stumbled back, staring at the blood. His blood, now coating the weapon. I'd just stabbed someone. I'd just hurt another person. The man collapsed, clutching his side, and bile rose in my throat. But there was no time to process, no time to be horrified. Connor was fighting both remaining attackers, holding them off with skill but clearly struggling. I forced myself to move, circling around to flank them. The woman noticed me and snarled, breaking away from Connor to charge. This time I was ready. I sidestepped her rush and stuck out my foot. Not elegant, not sophisticated, but effective. She sprawled across the stone floor, and Connor was there instantly, his boot on her back, sword at her throat. "Don't move," he commanded, breathing hard. The second man assessed the situation, his partner down, his ally disarmed, both Connor and I armed, and made the smart choice. He bolted, disappearing back into the shadows. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing and the distant noise of continued fighting above us. "You all right?" Connor asked me, not taking his eyes off the woman pinned beneath him. "I stabbed someone," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "You did," Connor confirmed. "You saved both our lives. He would have killed me from behind." I looked at the man I'd wounded. He was still breathing, still conscious, his eyes tracking my movements with a mixture of pain and respect. "We need to secure them and get word to the Alpha King," Connor said. "Can you hold her while I bind them?" I raised the dagger, still slick with blood, and positioned myself where the woman could see it. "Move, and I'll do to you what I did to him," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. The woman's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "Maybe you'll survive after all," she said softly. Connor worked quickly, using rope he'd carried in his pack to bind both rogues' hands. The man I'd stabbed would need medical attention soon, but he wasn't in immediate danger. "Elena," Connor said, straightening, "we need to move. The passages aren't safe, but staying here isn't either. I'm going to get you to the Alpha King. He needs to know what they said, about this being planned, about having inside information, and about his first wife," I added quietly. Connor's expression shuddered. "Yes, that too." We left the bound rogues in the chamber. They'd be collected later, questioned, punished. Connor led me through a different passage, this one angling upward. The sounds of fighting grew louder as we climbed, no longer muffled by stone and distance. When we finally emerged, it was into chaos. The grand hall where I'd sat at my wedding reception just hours ago was now a battlefield. Tables overturned, food and wine spilled across the floor. Blood splattered on the walls. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, some horrifyingly still, and in the center of it all stood Dante. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. His formal jacket was torn and bloodied, his hair wild, his eyes blazing with an inner fire. He fought with a grace that was almost beautiful, each movement precise and deadly. 3 rogues surrounded him, but he moved through them like water, his blade finding gaps in their defense with brutal efficiency. As I watched, he disarmed one opponent and used the man's own momentum to throw him into another. The third rogue tried to tackle him from behind, but Dante twisted at the last second, caught the man's arm, and broke it with a sickening crack. "Your Majesty!" Connor shouted over the din. Dante's head snapped toward us, and I saw the exact moment he registered my presence. Relief and fury warred across his features. He dispatched his final opponent with a swift strike and strode toward us, violence still radiating from every line of his body. "Why isn't she in the safe room?" he demanded, his voice rough with exertion and anger. "The passages were compromised," Connor said quickly. "They had inside knowledge. We were ambushed. Elena saved my life." Dante's eyes cut to me, taking in the blood on my hands, the dagger I still held, the robe I wore instead of my wedding dress. "You're hurt?" "Not my blood," I said, echoing Connor's earlier words. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. He reached out and took my free hand, his grip warm and solid despite the chaos around us. "Stay with me," he said. It wasn't a request. "The attack is nearly repelled, but I need you where I can see you." Before I could respond, a new figure burst through the main doors. A woman with silver-streaked hair and cold blue eyes, flanked by guards wearing different colors than Dante's forces. "Alpha King," she called, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came as soon as we received word. My pack stands ready to assist." Dante's hand tightened on mine. "Lady Meredith," he said, and I heard the carefully controlled distrust in his voice. "How fortunate that you were close enough to respond so quickly." The woman, Lady Meredith, smiled thinly. "Indeed, one might almost think I was expected." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation, and I understood, with sudden, cold clarity, that the attack might be over, but the real danger was just beginning. The aftermath of battle settled over the grand hall like dust after an explosion. Dante's warriors moved through the space with practiced efficiency, separating the wounded from the dead, binding prisoners, restoring order from chaos. But the tension in the air hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had intensified with Lady Meredith's arrival. She stood near the entrance, her silver-streaked hair gleaming in the torchlight, surrounded by at least 20 guards bearing her pack's insignia. A silver wolf on a black field. Her expression was placid, almost bored, as if she attended post-battle scenes regularly. Perhaps she did. "We should speak privately," Dante said, his hand still gripping mine. Not possessively, I realized, but protectively, as if he feared someone might try to take me if he let go. "Of course," Lady Meredith agreed smoothly, "though I suspect your new bride would benefit from rest after such an eventful wedding night." There was something in her tone that made my skin crawl. Not quite mockery, not quite sympathy, but something calculating that set off warning bells in my mind. "My wife stays with me," Dante said flatly, and I felt a small thrill at his immediate defense. "Connor, secure the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization. And find me whoever was responsible for passage security. I want answers." "Yes, Your Majesty." Connor bowed slightly, his eyes meeting mine for just a moment. There was approval there, and something else. Respect, maybe. He'd seen me fight. He'd seen me make choices under pressure. That counted for something in a warrior's world. As Connor departed, Dante led me toward a side chamber, smaller than the grand hall, likely used for private meetings. Lady Meredith followed with 3 of her guards, though Dante's own warriors flanked us as well. The balance of power was delicate, everyone armed, everyone watching. The chamber was furnished simply, a table, several chairs, maps on the walls showing the northern territories. Dante released my hand only to close the door behind us, shutting out the noise and chaos beyond. "Sit," he said to me, pulling out a chair. I sat, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the attack was fading, leaving behind trembling muscles and the nauseating memory of my dagger sinking into flesh. Lady Meredith remained standing, as did her guards and Dante's. Everyone positioned strategically, everyone ready for violence if it came to that. "The rogues who attacked tonight were well organized," Dante began, his voice taking on the formal tone of an alpha conducting pack business. "They knew our defenses, our protocols, the layout of the passages. That suggests either extensive surveillance or inside information. Or both," I added quietly. Everyone's attention swiveled to me. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but forced myself to continue. "The woman who attacked Connor and me, she knew we'd be forced to use the passages. She was waiting for us, That's not just knowing the layout, that's knowing operational procedure. Lady Meredith's eyebrows rose fractionally. Your new queen has teeth, Dante. How refreshing. Tell me about your brother, Dante said to me, ignoring Meredith completely. What pack is he allied with? I blinked, confused. My brother? I don't have a brother. I'm an only child. Your father's son from his first marriage, then. There isn't one. My mother was his first and only wife. I looked between Dante and Meredith, trying to understand. Why? Dante's jaw tightened. Because the female rogue you encountered claimed I killed her brother 5 years ago. She implied you were related. The pieces clicked into place. She was lying, I said immediately, trying to make me doubt you, make me afraid. She said your first wife died because she tried to leave you. I met Dante's eyes directly. I didn't believe her then, and I don't believe her now. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or relief. Why? Because cowards lie to justify their actions, and because... I hesitated, then pushed forward. Because you gave me my mother's journal. Someone cruel wouldn't think of that. Someone cruel wouldn't care. How touching, Lady Meredith interrupted, her tone making it clear she found it anything but. However, we have more pressing concerns than newlywed sentiment. The fact remains that 50 rogues somehow acquired detailed intelligence about your security measures, Dante. That kind of leak doesn't happen by accident. Which is why I'm curious about your timely arrival, Dante said coldly. Your territory is 4 hours north. Yet you appeared within an hour of the attack's onset. Care to explain? Lady Meredith smiled, and it was like watching ice form over water. I was already in the area. I came to pay my respects at your wedding, but was delayed by other matters. When I heard the alarm howls, I rushed to assist. Other matters, Dante repeated. Be specific. Pack business that doesn't concern you. Everything in the Northern Territories concerns me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lady Meredith's guards shifted their weight, hands moving closer to weapons. Dante's warriors mirrored the movement. I could feel violence building in the air like a thunderstorm gathering strength. Stop, I said, louder than intended. Everyone looked at me again. I stood, forcing my voice to remain steady despite my racing heart. Fighting among ourselves is exactly what tonight's attackers wanted. Chaos, suspicion, division. If we turn on each other, they've already won. The girl makes sense, one of Meredith's guards said, a tall woman with scars crossing her face. Though it pains me to admit it. Lady Meredith's eyes narrowed dangerously. You will be silent, Nessa. With respect, my lady, I will not. The scarred woman, Nessa, stepped forward. I've served your pack for 20 years. I've bled for you. And I'm telling you now that attacking the Alpha King, even verbally, is foolish. We came here to offer assistance, not to provoke conflict. The tension ratcheted higher. A subordinate openly contradicting her alpha was nearly unheard of. Lady Meredith's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Dante spoke. Nessa, is it? His voice was calm, almost gentle. You served under Lady Meredith's father, correct? I remember you from the territorial conferences when I was younger. Nessa inclined her head. I did, Your Majesty. Lord Gareth was a good man, fair, strategic. He was, Dante agreed. He taught me much about diplomacy before he passed. He paused deliberately. Tell me, when did Lady Meredith begin meeting with the Blackthorn Collective? The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Meredith's carefully composed expression cracked. I have no idea what The Blackthorn Collective, Dante continued as if she hadn't spoken, is a group of rogues and exiled alphas who believe the pack system should be dissolved. That individual territories should govern themselves without a king. They've been gaining influence over the past year, particularly among smaller packs who feel overlooked. He looked directly at Meredith. Your pack has been struggling financially since your father's death. Crops failing, trade routes disrupted. The Blackthorn Collective promised you resources if you helped destabilize my rule. Didn't they? Lady Meredith's face had gone white. You're making baseless accusations. Connor, Dante called, not raising his voice. The door opened immediately. Connor entered, carrying a leather satchel. He placed it on the table and stepped back, his expression grim. Dante opened the satchel and removed a stack of papers. Letters, I realized, written in elegant script. We captured one of tonight's attackers alive. He was very forthcoming after we explained the consequences of lying to the Alpha King. He spread the letters across the table. I could see signatures, dates, detailed plans, and at the bottom of several letters, Lady Meredith's seal. You plotted this attack, Dante said quietly. You provided the intelligence, you coordinated the timing, you planned to arrive after the chaos had peaked. Position yourself as the savior and use the gratitude to negotiate for resources and concessions. Lady Meredith said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. What you didn't anticipate, Dante continued, was that my security was better than you thought, that your rogues would fail, that your involvement would be discovered so quickly. He paused. And you certainly didn't anticipate that my new wife would prove capable of defending herself and exposing the trap. Nessa moved then, swiftly stepping away from Lady Meredith. The other guards under Meredith's command looked uncertain, torn between loyalty and survival instinct. The penalty for treason is death, Dante said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You understand this, Lady Meredith? Please, Meredith whispered, and all her cold composure had shattered. My pack. They need me. Without leadership. Your pack needs competent leadership, not a traitor who would sacrifice lives for personal gain. Dante's eyes were merciless. Nessa, you openly contradicted your alpha to prevent further conflict. You served her father with honor. Would you be willing to lead Meredith's pack? Nessa looked stunned. Your Majesty, I'm just a warrior. I don't have the bloodline. Bloodline means nothing compared to integrity, Dante said. I'm offering you leadership. Will you accept? I watched Nessa struggle with the decision, understanding the weight of what Dante was offering. To lead a pack was responsibility, burden, constant pressure, but it was also protection for those who depended on you. I will, Nessa said finally. For the pack, for the people who served Lord Gareth, I'll accept. Then, as Alpha King of the Northern Territories, I name you Lady Nessa, Alpha of the Northern Border Pack. Dante's voice rang with formal power. Do you accept all responsibilities and burdens this entails? I do. Then it is done. He turned to Lady Meredith, and I saw true fear in her eyes. You will be confined until formal trial can be arranged. Your cooperation in exposing other Blackthorn conspirators may influence your sentence, but make no mistake, your time as Alpha is finished. Connor and 2 other guards moved forward to take Meredith into custody. She didn't resist, all fight drained from her. As they led her toward the door, she looked at me, and I saw something bitter and twisted in her expression. You think you're safe now? She said softly. You think because you survived one night, you'll survive what's coming? He destroyed his first wife. He'll destroy you too. Remove her, Dante commanded. And Meredith was dragged away, still muttering warnings I couldn't quite hear. When the door closed behind them, the room felt suddenly empty despite the remaining guards. Dante exhaled slowly, some of the rigid control leaving his shoulders. Nessa, he said, take your new pack home. See to their needs. We'll discuss resources and support tomorrow. Thank you, Your Majesty. Nessa bowed, then surprised me by bowing to me as well. My lady, you have courage. That's worth more than bloodline too. Then she and her guards departed, leaving Dante and me alone with just 2 of his personal warriors standing by the door. I sank back into my chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. This was my wedding day, I said numbly. I woke up this morning in my father's house, and now I've stabbed someone, uncovered a conspiracy, and witnessed a change in pack leadership. Welcome to life as queen, Dante said dryly, but there was something almost gentle in his tone. He pulled a chair close to mine and sat. And for the first time since the ceremony, we were at eye level, almost intimate in proximity. You believed me, he said quietly. When that rogue lied about my first wife, you didn't believe her. Should I have? Most would have. He looked down at his hands, strong hands, scarred from years of fighting, stained with blood from tonight's battle. My first wife, Catherine, She didn't try to leave me. She was killed by assassins sent by the Blackthorn Collective. They wanted to weaken me, isolate me. It worked for a long time. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I didn't love her, Dante continued, his voice carefully neutral. She didn't love me. It was an arranged marriage like ours, but I respected her, and I failed to protect her. That's why when I married you, I made sure. He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Made sure what? I prompted. That you could protect yourself, if necessary. He looked at me directly. I had Connor choose a dagger that fit your hand. I had him place it where you'd see it. I wanted you armed, even if you didn't know why. I thought about the dagger I'd carried all night, the one that had saved Connor's life and my own. You expected something like this to happen. I hoped I was wrong, but the Blackthorn Collective has been growing bolder. Marrying again made me vulnerable in their eyes. He paused. Made you vulnerable. I'm sorry for that. Stop apologizing, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm tired of people apologizing for things they didn't choose. You didn't choose this marriage any more than I did. But we're in it now, and tonight proves something important. What's that? That I'm not helpless, that I can think, fight, survive. I met his storm-gray eyes. That maybe we can make this work, not as master and servant, but as partners, allies. Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something warmer, more genuine. Partners, he repeated, as if testing the word. I've never had a partner before. Catherine and I barely spoke. My advisors serve but don't truly collaborate. I've been alone for a very long time, Elena. Hearing him say my name, really say it, with feeling behind it, did something strange to my chest, made it tight and warm simultaneously. You're not alone anymore, I said softly. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, the warrior king and the reluctant bride, brought together by politics but finding something unexpected in the aftermath of violence. Not love, not yet, perhaps not ever, but understanding. Recognition. A knock at the door broke the moment. Your Majesty, Connor's voice called. The hall is secured. The wounded are being tended. And there's someone asking to speak with the Queen. Dante frowned. Who? Her mother. I stood immediately, my heart jumping. My mother's here. How? Your father brought your family to witness the wedding, Dante explained, rising as well. They were secured in the guest quarters during the attack. They're safe. Relief flooded through me so strongly my knees nearly buckled. Can I see her? Dante studied my face, and I saw him weighing duty against compassion. Then he nodded. Connor, escort Queen Elena to her mother. Stay with her. I need to coordinate cleanup and interrogations. Of course, Your Majesty. Dante touched my arm gently. We'll talk more later. About tonight. About everything. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As Connor led me through the corridors toward the guest quarters, I caught glimpses of the aftermath through open doors. Warriors cleaning weapons, healers tending wounds, servants restoring order. The castle was wounded, but not broken, much like I felt. When we reached the guest quarters, Connor knocked softly. It's safe now, Lady Hartley. Your daughter is here. The door flew open, and my mother pulled me into her arms before I could even register her movement. She smelled of lavender and home, and I hadn't realized how desperately I needed that comfort until I had it. Elena, thank the gods, she breathed against my hair. When we heard the fighting, when they wouldn't let us leave our rooms, I thought, I'm fine, Mama, I said, holding her tight. I'm all right. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes scanning for injuries. They landed on the blood staining my hands, the robe I wore instead of my wedding dress, and her face went pale. Elena, what happened? Behind her, I could see my father standing rigid and uncomfortable. He'd never been good with emotion, with vulnerability, but even he looked shaken. I glanced at Connor, who nodded and stepped back to give us privacy while remaining in the corridor outside. Mama, I said quietly, drawing her further into the room and closing the door. I need to tell you something, about tonight, about Dante, about all of it. And there, In the quiet safety of that guest room while my father listened in grim silence, I told my mother everything. The attack, the journal, the conspiracy, the moment I'd driven a dagger into human flesh to save Connor's life. When I finished, my mother was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling. "You survived," she whispered. "My brave, brilliant girl, you survived." "I did more than survive," I said, and realized it was true. I fought. I chose. I made a difference. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "The Alpha King, he protected you?" "He gave me the tools to protect myself," I corrected. "There's a difference." My father nodded slowly, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Respect, perhaps, or the beginning of it. "That's good," he said gruffly. "That's good." It wasn't an apology for forcing this marriage. It wasn't acknowledgement of my fear or his role in creating it. But from him, it was something. My mother hugged me again, fierce and protective. "You're stronger than I ever was," she murmured. "Stronger than I taught you to be." "You taught me to survive," I told her. That was enough. We stayed like that for a while, finding comfort in each other while the castle slowly recovered around us. When Connor finally knocked to inform me that Dante was requesting my presence, I felt ready. Not fearless, but capable. Not certain of what the future held, but prepared to face it. As I walked back through the corridors toward the Alpha King's private chambers, my chambers now, I thought about the girl I'd been that morning. Scared, helpless, trapped. She was gone, and in her place stood someone new. Someone who'd drawn blood and exposed traitors and spoken truth to power. Someone who was beginning to understand what it meant to be queen. 3 days after the attack, I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I was finally beginning to recognize as my own. The massive bed no longer felt like foreign territory, though Dante still slept in a separate chamber connected through an adjoining door. We hadn't discussed it. He simply made it clear that sharing space didn't require sharing intimacy until, if, we both chose it. Another unexpected kindness from the Warrior King. I dressed myself that morning, waving away the attendants who'd been assigned to me. I was still learning the boundaries of my new role, still figuring out where duty ended and choice began. But choosing my own clothes, simple dark trousers and a soft gray sweater rather than formal gowns, felt like reclaiming small pieces of autonomy. The castle was different in daylight, less imposing. I'd spent the past 2 days learning its corridors, meeting staff, beginning to understand the intricate web of relationships that kept this place functioning. The head cook, Margaret, had taken particular pleasure in feeding me. Apparently, I was too thin by half and needed proper northern food to survive the winter. The head of household, an older man named Bernard, had taught me the histories of various rooms and the proper protocols for formal events, but it was Connor who'd become my unlikely guide to everything that truly mattered. "Your Majesty requests your presence in the training yard," he announced now, appearing at my door with his characteristic blend of formality and warmth. I raised an eyebrow. "The training yard?" "He believes you should learn proper defensive techniques. Since you've already proven yourself capable in a crisis, he wants to ensure you're prepared for future situations." Connor's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "And before you ask, yes. He'll be teaching you himself." That surprised me. Doesn't he have more important things to do? Running 12 packs, investigating the Blackthorn collective conspiracy, managing post-attack recovery? He's delegated where possible, but this? Connor's expression grew more serious. "This he won't delegate. You're his wife, Elena. His responsibility. He takes that seriously." Something warm unfurled in my chest at those words. Not love. I wasn't naive enough to call it that, but the beginning of something. Trust, perhaps. Partnership. The training yard was located behind the main castle, a large open space surrounded by high stone walls. Warriors were already at work when I arrived, sparring in pairs, practicing forms, strength training. The sound of steel on steel rang through the crisp morning air. All activity stopped when I entered. I felt every eye turned toward me, assessing, judging. The new queen. The girl who'd been married barely a week. The one who'd survived the wedding night attack. but still had everything to prove. As you were. Dante's voice cut through the silence, commanding and absolute. The warriors resumed their training, though I caught sideways glances, whispered conversations. They were curious about me. Fair enough. I was curious about them too. Dante stood in the center of the yard, dressed in simple training clothes that somehow made him look more dangerous than formal attire ever could. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, the scar that ran along his left jaw, a memento from some past battle. You came, he said as I approached. You requested. Kings don't make requests, do they? They command. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Perhaps. But I'm trying to remember that queens have their own authority. He handed me a training sword, wooden, but weighted to feel like real steel. Show me what you know. I don't know anything. I've never trained. You killed an armed warrior with a dagger 3 days ago. You know something, even if you don't realize it. He raised his own training sword. Attack me. I stared at him. You want me to attack the Alpha King? In front of all these people? I want you to survive if someone threatens you again. Attack me, Elena. The use of my name, casual and certain, gave me courage. I lunged forward, swinging the sword in what I hoped was a threatening manner. Dante sidestepped easily, tapping my shoulder with his blade. Dead. Again. I tried a different approach, a low sweep I'd seen warriors use. He blocked it effortlessly. Dead again. What are you doing wrong? Everything? I suggested, frustrated. You're thinking too much. When you fought that rogue, you didn't think. You reacted on instinct. Find that instinct again. I tried to remember the underground chamber, the surge of fear and determination that had driven my dagger home. I tried to access that same desperate clarity. This time when I attacked, I didn't plan. I just moved. A feint high, then a real strike low. Dante blocked the high attack but had to step back from the low one. Not a hit, but close enough that his eyes showed approval. Better. Again. We sparred for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. Dante corrected my stance, my grip, my footwork. He was patient but demanding, never coddling but never cruel. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand the rhythm of combat, the dance of attack and defense, the balance between caution and boldness. Enough, he finally said, lowering his sword. You're exhausted, and pushing past exhaustion leads to sloppy technique. I was breathing hard, sweating despite the cool air, my arms trembling. But I felt alive in a way I never had before. Strong, capable. Tomorrow, same time, Dante said. We'll continue. Every day? Every day that circumstances allow. You're a target, Elena. You'll always be a target. The only question is whether you'll be a victim or a survivor. Before I could respond, one of Dante's advisors appeared at the edge of the training yard, an older man named Silas, with silver hair and calculating eyes. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the prisoner has requested to speak with you. She claims to have information about Blackthorn leadership. Lady Meredith. They'd kept her confined in the castle's secure chambers, extracting information about the conspiracy. Apparently, she'd decided to cooperate. I'll come now, Dante said, then looked at me. Would you like to observe? You have as much right as I do to hear what she has to say. It was another gesture of partnership, of treating me as an equal rather than a decoration. I nodded, following him and Silas back into the castle. The secure chambers were deep underground, reinforced and guarded. Lady Meredith looked diminished in her cell. No longer the cold, commanding presence from the wedding night, but a woman facing the consequences of betrayal. You asked to speak, Dante said without preamble. Speak. Meredith's eyes found mine first, lingering with an expression I couldn't quite read. I owe you an apology, girl, woman. Queen, I underestimated you. I don't want your apology. I want information that will keep people safe. Direct. I like that. Meredith shifted on her bench. The Blackthorn Collective is larger than you realize. It's not just disgruntled alphas and rogues. They have supporters in nearly every major pack. People who believe the old ways of individual territories are better than centralized rule. Names, Dante demanded. I can give you names, lists, meeting places. But in exchange, I want consideration for my pack, for the people I led. They didn't know about my involvement. They shouldn't suffer for my mistakes. That's not how treason works, Silas interjected coldly. But Dante held up a hand. Your pack is now under Lady Nessa's leadership. She's proven herself trustworthy. Your people will be cared for regardless of what happens to you. He paused. The question is, what happens to you? Cooperation may mean exile instead of execution, but that depends on the quality of information you provide. Meredith nodded slowly. There's a gathering. 2 weeks from now, in the abandoned mine system north of the Frost River, Blackthorn leadership will be there. All of them. They're planning something big, something meant to destabilize your rule permanently. What kind of something? I asked. I don't know the details. I was only peripherally involved, useful for intelligence but not trusted with core strategy. She looked at Dante. But I know they're afraid of you. Specifically, they're afraid of what happens if you produce an heir. A legitimate successor solidifies the monarchy in ways they can't counter. Silence fell over the chamber. I felt my face flush, understanding the implication. An heir meant consummation of the marriage. It meant intimacy I hadn't even considered yet. We'll investigate the gathering, Dante said, his voice carefully neutral. Silas, arrange reconnaissance. I want eyes on that mine system within 48 hours. And the other matter? Meredith pressed. The heir? That's none of your concern. Dante's tone made it clear the discussion was over. As we left the chambers, I felt the weight of unspoken expectations pressing down on me. Everyone would be watching now, waiting to see if the marriage produced children. It was medieval and invasive, and completely expected in pack politics. Elena, Dante said once we were alone in the corridor, I need you to understand something. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. That pressure, the expectation of heirs, it's real. It's part of why arranged marriages exist in our world. Succession, legacy, stability. He ran a hand through his hair, looking unusually uncertain. But I won't force you. I won't pressure you. That choice is yours to make when, if, you're ready. Everyone will expect. Let them expect. This is between us, no one else. His storm gray eyes met mine. I've had enough of performing for political audiences. Haven't you? I had. Gods, I had, I said quietly. We stood there in the dim corridor, neither quite sure how to navigate this strange marriage we'd been thrust into. Then Dante did something unexpected. He offered his hand, palm up, not demanding but inviting. I took it. His hand was warm, calloused from years of sword work, surprisingly gentle. We walked back through the castle like that, hand in hand, and it felt like claiming something. Not love, not yet, but connection, the beginning of trust. Over the next week, a routine developed. Morning training with Dante, where I slowly learned to defend myself with increasing competence. Afternoons managing household affairs and learning the politics of the Northern Territories. Evenings spent in Dante's study, where he taught me about pack dynamics, territorial disputes, the delicate balance of power that kept 12 different packs functioning as a unified kingdom. Connor became a constant presence, equal parts guard and friend. He told me stories about Dante's early years as king, the challenges he'd faced, the loneliness that had shaped him. He's different with you, Connor said one afternoon while we walked the castle gardens. More present, like he remembers he's human, not just a title. I'm not sure that's a compliment to either of us, I said wryly. It's an observation, a hopeful one. The reconnaissance reports came back confirming Lady Meredith's information. The abandoned mine system north of Frost River showed signs of recent activity, tracks, supplies, preparations for a large gathering. Dante began planning a response, coordinating with loyal alphas, preparing his warriors. And through it all, I found myself pulled deeper into his world. Not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. He asked my opinions on strategy. He valued my insights about pack members I'd spoken with. He treated me like the partner he'd promised to consider me. The night before the planned operation against the Blackthorn gathering, Dante knocked on the door connecting our chambers. I called for him to enter, setting aside the book I'd been reading. More of my mother's journal, the gift that had started this unexpected understanding between us. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Thinking too much." He settled into the chair by the fireplace, looking tired. "Tomorrow is important. If we can capture Blackthorn leadership, we might prevent years of conflict. And if things go wrong, then we'll deal with whatever comes. Together, I hope. Together." That word had come to mean something between us. Not romance exactly, but solidarity. A united front against everything trying to tear us apart. "Dante," I said carefully, "when Lady Meredith mentioned heirs, you dismissed it quickly. But it's not just political pressure, is it? You need succession for stability." He was quiet for a long moment. "I do. But not at the cost of forcing you into something you're not ready for. Catherine and I, we did our duty. We tried. But there was no affection, no real partnership, just obligation." He looked at me directly. "I don't want that with you. I want—" He trailed off, seeming unsure how to finish. "What do you want?" I prompted gently. "Something real. Even if it takes time. Even if it never becomes love. I want honesty between us, Elena. Respect. Choice." I stood, crossing to where he sat. My heart was pounding, but I felt certain in a way I hadn't before. I want that too, and I think we're building it. Slowly. But it's there. I reached out, touching his face. The scarred jaw, the tired eyes, the mouth that rarely smiled but occasionally softened when he looked at me. He caught my hand, holding it against his cheek. "You're braver than you know," he said quietly. "I learned from watching you." Something shifted between us then. A doorway opening, an invitation extended and cautiously accepted. Dante stood, and we were close enough that I could feel his warmth, smell the pine and steel scent that clung to him. "May I kiss you?" he asked, giving me the choice he'd promised. Yes. This kiss was nothing like the one at our wedding. That had been performative, obligatory. This was real, tentative at first, then deepening as we both leaned into it. His hand cupped the back of my neck. My fingers curled into his shirt, and for those moments the entire world narrowed to just sensation and connection. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "Tomorrow, I ride out to confront the Blackthorn Collective. It's dangerous, and I can't guarantee I'll return." "You'll return," I said with certainty I didn't quite feel. "You're too stubborn not to," he almost smiled. "Nevertheless, if something happens, Connor will protect you. He has orders to get you to safety, to secure your position. The kingdom will need you. The kingdom needs both of us. Then I suppose I'd better survive." He kissed me again, softer this time, almost reverent. "Sleep well, Elena, and if I don't return, know that these past 2 weeks have been unexpected. Good, in ways I didn't anticipate." "You're coming back," I insisted. "That's not a goodbye." "Not a goodbye," he agreed. "I'll see you soon." After he left, I sat by the fire, touching my lips where his had been, feeling the ghost of his warmth. I'd married a stranger. I'd feared him. But somewhere between survival and strategy, fear had transformed into something else entirely. And tomorrow, that something would be tested. Dawn broke cold and clear over the northern territories. I stood at the eastern tower window, watching Dante's forces assemble in the courtyard below. 50 of his best warriors, armed and armored, preparing to ride north to the abandoned mines. To confront the Blackthorn Collective. To end the conspiracy that had poisoned pack politics for years. Dante stood among them, his dark armor catching the early light, his presence commanding even from this distance. He was reviewing final orders with his captains, his movements efficient and confident. A king preparing for battle. My husband, preparing for battle. The thought still felt strange, but less strange than it had 2 weeks ago. "You should eat something," Connor said from behind me. He'd stationed himself outside my chambers since before sunrise, taking his role as my protector seriously, now that Dante would be away. "I'm not hungry. You need to maintain your strength. Today will be difficult, and you'll be managing castle operations in His Majesty's absence." That snapped my attention back to him. "What?" Connor's expression was carefully neutral. The Alpha King has temporarily transferred castle authority to you. All household decisions, minor judicial matters, and routine pack business will be yours to oversee until he returns. That's not standard protocol. I'd learned enough about pack hierarchy to know wives didn't typically hold that kind of power, especially brand new wives. No, Connor agreed. It's not, but His Majesty believes you've proven yourself capable, and more importantly, he trusts you. Trust. That word again, heavy with meaning. What if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them. That's what leadership is. Connor moved to stand beside me at the window. My lady, Elena, you've survived an assassination attempt, exposed a traitor, and learned basic combat in less than 2 weeks. Managing castle affairs is actually less dangerous. Less dangerous, but higher stakes. People depend on these decisions. They do. Which is why the Alpha King chose someone who understands that responsibility matters more than politics. Below, Dante mounted his horse. A massive black stallion that seemed as fierce as its rider. He looked up at the tower, and even from this distance, I felt his gaze find mine. He raised one hand in acknowledgement. Not quite a wave, more a promise. I pressed my palm against the glass in response. Then he turned his horse and led his warriors out through the main gates, disappearing into the forest beyond. The courtyard felt suddenly empty, the castle somehow colder. Come, Connor said gently. Bernard has prepared the schedule for today. You should review it before the morning petitions begin. The morning petitions. I'd watched Dante handle them twice. Pack members bringing disputes, requests, complaints, everything from property disagreements to family feuds to trade concerns. It required judgment, patience, and the ability to read people quickly. Now it was my responsibility. I dressed carefully, not in delicate gowns, but in practical clothes that announced authority without pretension. Dark trousers, a deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread, boots suitable for walking the castle if needed. I braided my pale hair back, remembering my mother's advice from years ago. A woman's appearance is armor. Choose yours carefully. The throne room felt cavernous when I entered. The actual throne sat empty. That was Dante's alone. But beside it, a smaller chair had been placed, clearly meant for me. A queen's seat, positioned to show partnership rather than subordination. Another of Dante's quiet statements about what our marriage could be. Bernard appeared with stacks of papers, his weathered face professionally blank. Your Majesty, we have 17 petitions scheduled for this morning. I've arranged them by priority. Urgent matters first, then routine business. Walk me through the urgent ones, I said, settling into my chair and trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. The first petition involved a dispute between 2 farming families over water rights. The second concerned a traveling merchant accused of selling contaminated grain. The third was a mother requesting permission to remarry after her husband's death in the wedding attack, complicated by pack traditions about mourning periods. I listened to each carefully, asking questions, weighing options. Some decisions came easily. The water rights issue had clear precedent in pack law. Others required more thought. For the grieving widow, I consulted with the castle's elder council, then ruled that while tradition suggested a year of mourning, circumstances of violent death warranted compassion. She could remarry with the pack's blessing. By midday, I'd handled all 17 petitions. Some people had left satisfied, others disappointed but accepting. No one had challenged my authority directly, though I'd felt their uncertainty. This young queen, barely an adult herself, making decisions that affected their lives. You did well, Bernard said after the last petitioner departed. Fair rulings, all of them. His Majesty will be pleased if he returns, I said quietly. When he returns, Bernard corrected firmly. The Alpha King has survived worse than a nest of conspirators. I wanted to believe that. But worry gnawed at me throughout the afternoon as I reviewed household accounts, met with the kitchen staff about winter provisions, and consulted with the guard captain about security improvements post-attack. Evening fell with no word from the north. I ate dinner alone in the private dining room, pushing food around my plate more than eating it. Connor stood his usual post by the door, a reassuring presence. How long should the operation take? I asked. If everything goes smoothly, they'd reach the mines by midday, engage the enemy, secure prisoners, and start back. We might receive word by tomorrow morning. And if things don't go smoothly, Connor's silence was answer enough. I retired to my chambers but couldn't sleep. I tried reading my mother's journal, but the words blurred together. I paced the room, counting steps, watching shadows shift as the moon rose. Around midnight, I finally gave up on sleep and wrapped myself in a robe, intending to make tea in the small kitchen attached to my chambers, but as I passed the door to Dante's adjoining room, I hesitated. I'd never entered his space without invitation, but tonight, with him gone and worry eating at me, I needed to feel closer to him somehow. The door was unlocked, a sign of trust between us. I pushed it open quietly. His chamber was surprisingly spare. A bed, neatly made, a desk covered in maps and reports, weapons mounted on walls, and on the nightstand beside his bed, a small portrait in a simple frame. I moved closer, curious. The portrait showed a young woman with kind eyes and dark hair, beautiful, in a quiet way. She wore formal clothes and smiled softly at whoever had painted her. Catherine, his first wife. I picked up the portrait carefully, studying her face. She looked gentle, perhaps a little sad. What had her life been like, married to a man who didn't love her? Had she hoped for affection? Had she felt trapped as I initially had? She would have liked you, I spun, nearly dropping the portrait. Nessa stood in the doorway, Lady Nessa now, though she'd returned to the castle earlier today to report on her pack's transition. I'm sorry, I stammered. I shouldn't have. You're his wife. His room is yours to enter. Nessa moved into the chamber with the ease of someone who'd been here before. I served in this castle when Catherine was alive. She was kind, but not strong. The weight of being queen crushed her slowly. How did she really die? I asked, replacing the portrait carefully. Nessa was quiet for a moment. Assassins, as the king said. Blackthorn operatives who infiltrated the castle. They killed her in her sleep, made it look like natural causes at first. But investigation revealed the truth. She paused. Dante blamed himself, still does. He'd been away on border patrol, trusting castle security to keep her safe. It failed. That's why he's so protective now, why he insisted on training me, why he gave me weapons. He won't lose another wife to his enemies. He'd die first. Nessa's scarred face softened slightly. But with you, it's different. Catherine was a duty. You're becoming something more. We barely know each other. Sometimes knowing comes after choosing. You've both chosen to try, despite everything. That matters. A commotion from the courtyard interrupted our conversation. Shouts, the sound of horses, urgent voices calling for healers. My heart seized with fear. Nessa and I ran for the stairs, Connor materializing from wherever he'd been stationed to follow. We burst out into the courtyard to chaos. Warriors dismounting, some wounded, others helping injured comrades. Blood and mud everywhere, and in the center of it all, Dante. He was alive. Bleeding from a gash on his arm, limping slightly, but alive. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I nearly collapsed. His eyes found mine across the courtyard, and something in his expression cracked, the iron control he maintained, the warrior king facade. For just a moment, he looked vulnerable, human. I ran to him without thinking, propriety and protocol forgotten. He caught me as I collided with him, his arms wrapping around me despite his injuries. You're alive, I breathed against his chest. I promised I'd return. His voice was rough with exhaustion. We captured most of Blackthorn leadership, scattered the rest. It's over, Elena. The conspiracy is broken. Healers were trying to reach him, to treat his wounds, but he held me for a moment longer. Then he pulled back slightly, wincing at the movement. Let them help you, I said, forcing myself to release him. In a moment. First, he raised his voice to address the assembled crowd. Your queen managed the castle in my absence. I want reports on her decisions, her judgments. If anyone has complaints, bring them forward now. Silence. Then Bernard stepped forward. Your Majesty, the queen handled all matters with wisdom beyond her years. Fair rulings. Compassionate where appropriate, firm where necessary. The castle ran smoothly under her authority. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I felt heat rise to my face, not from embarrassment, but from pride. I'd done it. I'd proven myself capable. Dante's eyes met mine again, and this time he smiled. A real smile. Tired, but genuine. Then it seems I chose my queen well. Over the next few days, the castle settled into new rhythms. Dante recovered from his injuries. Nothing serious, just cuts and bruises from the battle. The captured Blackthorn leaders were interrogated, their networks dismantled, their supporters scattered. Lady Meredith's cooperation earned her exile rather than execution, though she'd never hold power again. Nessa proved to be an excellent alpha for the Northern Border Pack, bringing stability and honor to a territory that had been mismanaged under Meredith's rule. She visited the castle regularly, becoming an unexpected advisor and friend, and slowly, carefully, Dante and I built something real. It started with small things, shared meals, conversations that went beyond politics, training sessions that became less about defense and more about partnership. He taught me sword work. I taught him patience with castle staff who feared his intensity. He showed me the kingdom's borders. I showed him how to listen to pack members' concerns, rather than just ruling from above. 1 month after our wedding, I woke to find Dante in my room, not his, mine, sitting by the window watching dawn break. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sitting up, thinking about the past month, how different it's been from what I expected. Good, different, or bad different? Good. He turned to look at me, his storm-gray eyes soft in the early light. When I arranged this marriage, I told myself it was purely political. Protection for your father's pack, stability for the kingdom. I didn't expect to actually like you. I didn't expect to like you either, I admitted. I was terrified. You were this distant, powerful figure who'd lost one wife already. And now? Now you're just Dante, still powerful, still sometimes distant, but also kind and thoughtful, and surprisingly patient with a girl who didn't know how to be queen. He moved to sit on the edge of my bed. You're not that girl anymore. You've become the queen the kingdom needs. Strong, fair, capable. You've earned respect that wasn't freely given. We've earned it, I corrected. Together. He reached out, tucking a strand of pale hair behind my ear. The gesture was tender, intimate in a way we hadn't quite allowed ourselves before. "Elena," he said carefully, "I need you to know. This isn't duty anymore, not for me. What I feel when you're near, when I watch you making decisions or training or just existing in my space, that's not obligation. That's choice." I finished, understanding. It's choice. Yes. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. I choose this too. Choose you. Choose us. Whatever we're becoming. He leaned forward slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I didn't want to. Our lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the tentative first one, or even the passionate kiss before he'd left for battle. This was something deeper, acknowledgement, promise, beginning. When we broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. I didn't think I could, but I am. My heart felt too large for my chest. "I'm falling too. It's terrifying and wonderful and nothing like I imagined. Stay with me," he said. "Not because you have to. Because you want to. I'm not going anywhere." That night, our night, finally chosen rather than obligated, we closed the door on the world and discovered what partnership could become when fear transformed into trust and duty blossomed into something infinitely more precious. In the months that followed, the Northern Territories flourished under joint rule. Dante remained the warrior king, strong and strategic. But now he ruled with a partner who brought compassion to complement his strength, who could see what he missed and speak truth when others feared to. I never stopped training, never stopped learning, never stopped growing into the role I'd been thrust into but had claimed as my own. And when, 6 months after our wedding, I discovered I was carrying Dante's child, an heir, a future, a promise, I felt not trapped, but empowered. This child would be born from choice, from love that had grown in the spaces between fear and hope. What do you think? Dante asked one evening, his hand resting on my still flat stomach. Boy or girl? Does it matter? Not even slightly, as long as they have your courage and your heart. And your stubbornness? Gods help us if they inherit that. I laughed, the sound echoing through our shared chambers. Rooms we'd fully combined now. No more separate spaces, no more careful distance. Connor had been right, that first night. Dante wasn't what I'd thought. He was better. More complex, more human, more capable of love than either of us had believed possible. And I, the scared 19-year-old girl forced into marriage with a stranger, had become someone I barely recognized. Someone strong, someone respected, someone loved. Queen Elena of the Northern Territories. But more importantly, Elena, woman, warrior, wife, mother-to-be, survivor who'd chosen to thrive instead of merely endure. The girl who'd walked down that aisle in terror was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd found power in vulnerability, strength in partnership, and love in the last place she'd ever expected to find it. And as I stood in the tower window 1 year after my wedding, Dante's arms around me, our child growing within me, the kingdom peaceful below, I finally understood what Connor had tried to tell me that terrible, beautiful wedding night. Sometimes the scariest doors lead to the most extraordinary destinations. You just have to be brave enough to walk through them. And on the other side, you might discover not just survival, but joy, not just duty, but choice. Not just a king, but a partner. Not just a marriage, but a home.